Hello everyone, welcome to the pre-scene discussion of the August 2018 CIMA operational case study. My name is Hashan Madushanka and I'm the lead tutor as well as the founder of LCI Academy. So speaking a little bit about myself, I have been a tutor for the operational case study ever since it was launched by CIMA back in 2015. And I have successfully coached students globally for every case study session from 2015 until now. So I have coached thousands of students globally and achieved very high pass rates. And we of course provide pre-scene discussions as well as other study materials for all the operational case study sessions. Right, so getting started with the pre-scene discussion. As you see, the name of the company is quite clear. It's Thomas Fine Teas, and we see a photograph of 3 different grades of tea. So possibly a variety of black tea, oolong tea, and possibly white tea. Now, if you're not familiar with these names that I just mentioned, don't worry. We will look at these in more detail as we proceed with the pre-scene. Now, this industry is particularly one of my personal favorites, being from Sri Lanka, and this is our main export. And also personally, I have worked in the tea trade for quite some time, and I own a small scale tea export operation. So needless to say, I have a lot of experience in this industry and of course knowledge. So let's get started with the pre-scene. As you see, the content, well, it's a 29-page pre-scene. Now usually the pre-scene that is usually released would be around 23 pages, 20 to 23 pages, but this session, the pre-scene is a little more detailed. And as we proceed, we understand that this is mainly due to a high level of budget information, which covers around 5 pages. Now, before we begin with the first page of the pre-scene, I would like to make a small request to you. Now, I do not usually annotate the pre-scene and make notes as I read, because that is something I believe you should do. So now that the pre-scene is released to you, the student copy is released to you, I would first recommend you to have a printed copy of the pre-scene in front of you, or even a soft copy wouldn't be an issue, but I would highly recommend to have a printed copy. And as I am explaining, whatever points that I highlight, I recommend you to do the same. And also, whenever I make some important points, whenever I talk about something important, please make sure that you make your notes. And for this purpose, I would recommend you to have a notepad apart from the hard copy of the pre-scene. So making notes in your own way, well, it will help you to absorb the contents and help you to understand the industry even more, rather than me simply annotating and making notes on the side of the pre-scene. I believe that it's a much higher, much effective technique for you to make your own notes. So I would recommend you to hit the pause button for a moment and get those 2 items ready, and then click the play button. So I believe you have the pre-scene hard copy, a notepad and a pen right in front of you. Now, I wouldn't mind you making notes in the computer itself, in the maybe in a Word document or or in the notepad, but it would be a bit of a distraction to possibly pause the video and open the notepad. So just writing it down would help, right? Okay, so getting started with the introduction. So the name of the company, as we saw earlier, it's Thomas Fine Teas. So we can refer to this now on as TFT. So TFT is a company based in Zealand, which is in Europe. Now let me first remind you, especially for those of you sitting for the case study for the first time, please remember that this country is a fictitious or a hypothetical country. It's a made-up country, and the pre-scene may have information about the features of this country, about the geography, but please do not research about real-world countries that are similar to this, because it's a completely made-up country. Now you might find certain countries which has similar features to this country mentioned, but it's just a coincidence, right? The CIMA examiner has made it very clear that it's a fictitious country, a fictitious company. Now doing some research on real world companies would help, but don't spend time to find out what real world company this corresponds with, because it's just a random made up company by your examiner, right? So don't waste time on unnecessary things, right? So regarding the industry, of course, we provide you an industry analysis for the tea industry. So that can be found by clicking on the link below the video, where you have a list of all the OCS products that you can invest in. So reading through, so this is a country in Europe which has a population of around 35 million. Now the size of the population may not exactly be a good indicator of the size of the country, because you find, if you look at a country like Australia has over just over 20 million people, and it's one of the largest countries in the world. And Sri Lanka, if you take Sri Lanka, that has the same population as well, and it's a very tiny country compared to the size of Australia. So the size of the population is not a good indicator of the geographical size of the country. Now this being in Europe, well, it might have certain implications from the European Union, and the strength of the euro can have an impact on this. And also there are many countries within Europe that are high consumers of tea, especially if you look at UK, right, and many other European countries. Tea is a highly consumed beverage in most of those countries, along with coffee as well. And just a fact that you may have known by now is the fact that tea is the most consumed beverage in the world, exceeding coffee, exceeding beer, exceeding other carbonated soft drinks, and so on. Right, so we have some information about the country. Dealand has a lengthy coastline with developed ports and borders several other countries. Now this is definitely a strategic advantage, because when you're looking at tea, there's a possibility that they might be importing tea, and also they might be exporting their final product, which we don't know for now. But in case they do that, having developed ports and of course a coastline will definitely be an advantage, because the ships that carry tea, or the ships that will take the products of this company, can easily access and move out through the ports of the country. And bordering several other countries would also help them to transport their products to other countries, and maybe bring raw material and other things from these bordering countries. So definitely a strategic advantage in terms of the geographical location. Its currency is the D dollar. So once again, fictional currency. Please do not assume that this is equivalent to the US dollar or any other dollar for that matter. It is purely a made up currency, right? Okay, TFT imports tea leaves. So there you go. Having developed ports will definitely be an advantage, because the shipping cost and the logistics, the inbound logistics cost can reduce, because if the country has a port by itself, the access will be much easier. So it imports tea leaf from around the world and creates its own distinctive blends and produces its own tea bags for sale to supermarkets and wholesalers. Right. TFT also blends and produces herb-based infusions. Okay, so a lot to discuss in that paragraph. So importing tea leaves from around the world, so that definitely would be relevant to the transport cost or the inbound logistics cost. It would have to incur shipping charges. There would also be certain taxes levied on imports, right? And policies of the government on taxation and other aspects, the political stability of the country, can all have an impact on this. Sometimes, countries can impose certain restrictions to imports, and in that case, they might have to face certain issues. And another crucial aspect would be the exchange rates, because when we import items from another country, there's a good chance that the invoicing may happen in the currency of that particular country. So, for example, if TFT is importing tea from, say, China, it has to be shipped for a long way, and also it may have to be settled through the Chinese currency. So in F1, in the subject F1, we know that IAS 21 looks at foreign currency transactions. So you need to be aware on how to deal with foreign currency transactions when the transaction takes place, at the year end, and also at the settlement time. Right? So there are 3 points that you need to be aware about in terms of the accounting treatment. Three translations can happen. That would be on the day of the transaction, if it's a credit transaction, then at the year end possibly if the transaction is not settled, and of course on the settlement date. Right? So your F1 textbook or your study notes cover these in detail, and perhaps if you are looking for good study notes relevant to the 3 subjects, we are more than happy to provide that to you from LCI Academy. Our set of experienced tutors, we have summarized all the areas that are relevant for your case study into a set of notes, and these notes will definitely be extremely useful for you while you're preparing for this exam, because you may not have the time to go through the entire official study text. So we have summarized all the important points. So you can find more information about that by clicking the link below and be directed to our products page. Right, so they import tea leaves from around the world and they create their own distinctive blends. Now, one more point that I need to mention is the political stability of the countries from which it imports. Now, for example, if you look at, say, a country like India, for example, let's say, for example, they suffer with labor-related issues, or they can suffer from, say, natural disasters, maybe heavy rainfall or severe drought. So that will have an impact on the tea prices. And a well-known fact about the tea industry is that most countries that produce tea, that has tea plantations, they have an auction in that country that is generally overlooked by the government. Right now, the market forces will of course decide the price, but then again there is a level of government involvement. So subject to the world market prices, this could have an impact on the bottom line of TFT, that is of course the profits. So they create their own distinctive blends. Now, tea is a product that you can create many varieties out of. At a basic level, you have 4 different varieties of tea, which will be discussed in more detail later on. So just for your information, that's black tea, green tea, oolong tea, and of course white tea. And if you take, for example, black tea, there are so many sub varieties like OP, OPA, PECO, FBOP, so on. And you can mix these different blends and create distinctive flavors, right? And they have a variety of taste notes, right? So you have specialized tea tasters that are involved in this, just like wine tasting, right? So depending on the market, depending on the tastes of the customers, TFT would be able to create different blends, and some of these blends might be difficult to imitate by other companies. So that will give them some sort of a competitive advantage, especially if the blend has picked up in the market and the customers really like this blend. Right, so they seem to sell these in tea bags. So companies that pack tea, they might sell these in the form of tea bags or maybe in the form of loose packets. So when it comes to tea bags, something you need to remember is that the tea has to be more in the form of a dust than in the form of a leaf. So when it comes to a leaf, that would be pretty thick, and it does not exactly fit into tea bags. It's generally sold as a loose pack. So for them to pack in the form of tea bags, it generally has to be more towards a dusty variety of tea, because they need to fit into the bag. So their customers seem to be supermarkets and wholesalers. So seem to be more of a producer that sells to the middleman, right? Who in turn sells it to the final customer. So TFT to the supermarket and supermarket to the customer, right? That would be the link. TFT to the wholesaler. Wholesaler might be providing it to smaller outlets, small retail outlets, and then that goes to the customer. So it is important for TFT to provide a good price so that the supermarkets and the wholesalers can also keep a margin for themselves, right? So that is something that they need to look into, because when you set a price, you need to look at your cost structure, which would depend on the production cost and the cost of importing tea. Then of course you need to look at the competition, because TFT might not be the only company in this country, only company that packs tea. So you need to look at what prices are your competitors coming up with, but the competitive strategy will also matter here, because if you are looking at a high quality product, then you can definitely price it high. And of course you have to look at the customer preference. How much is the customer willing to pay? So all of that needs to be put into the thought process when it comes to deciding the price. Now, apart from tea, it seems like they also blend and produce herb-based infusions. Now, these herb-based infusions are catching up highly with popularity, because you see that if you look at the global trends, people are moving, more into organic produce. People are moving into a more healthier lifestyle with the awareness created by different ailments that the new society faces. And sometimes, certain people with their lifestyle, they may not have enough time to properly exercise and so on. So they might try to balance this through the food and beverage intake. So we know that tea and of course herb-based infusions are known for a lot of health benefits, right? So using these herb-based infusions on a daily basis can actually improvise the health. So that is actually a marketing point that TFT can use, because the more you push these benefits into the consumer psychology, they will be able to of course increase their sales. So don't forget that marketing is a very important aspect in your case study, especially due to being an E1 subject, right? It accounts for a considerable chunk in your E1 syllabus, and marketing is something that is frequently tested in almost every case study session. Now, another thing that we need to discuss is the type of operation. So we generally have companies that produce, we have companies that buy and sell, we have companies that provide services. So in our case, we qualify to be a producer because we import the raw material, turn it, or you add value to it, and then sell it to the customer. So if you take a model like the value chain, Porter's value chain will definitely apply, and it's very useful for you as a student to conduct a value chain analysis relevant to this pre-scene before of course facing the exam. And once you do that, you can of course compare this with the value chain analysis that we have prepared from LCI Academy. So we have a strategic analysis prepared for you that's inclusive of the pestle analysis, the SWOT analysis, Porter's value chain, 4 P's of marketing, the Mendelov matrix. So some of the key models from E1, right? So you can always compare this with whatever work that you have done, right? And see whether you're on par. Now, production related can link into many areas across the three subjects. So let me just talk about a few of these. If you look at the main trigger of this exam, which is P1, you can move straight into the costing systems, right? So if you take tea, the tea bags would be generally a standard product instead of a customized product. So they would follow a particular standard when it comes to the blend of the tea. They would pack it and then sell it. So standard costing is definitely something that is applicable here, and variances such as direct material price variance would be relevant, which should be affected by the cost of importing or the cost of purchasing it. If you take direct material usage variance, that would, for example, depend on the efficiency and how careful the employees are with regards to the material handling. There might be a certain amount of wastage during the process, so they should try to minimize that. It just goes on like that. You can link it to so many different variances. Then also looking at the costing system. Now, when we are setting a price, as I mentioned earlier, one of the most important things we need to look at is the cost of production. So when it comes to cost of production, you have methods like absorption costing, marginal costing, and activity-based costing. So you need to be very thorough with how these apply to TFT. So if you look at marginal costing, this is where you basically take the variable cost, and fixed cost is simply considered as a period cost, right? So you're not going to split the fixed cost among the different product groups that we have, among the different departments. No, you're not going to do that. It's just taken as a total. Now, if TFT has a high level of fixed cost, then using marginal cost may not be very appropriate. Then you can look at absorption and ABC, which I would recommend you to read into, right? Because I don't have time to explain all the theories in this video, because I'm mainly looking at the industry. So if you look at the subject F1, let me just give you an example of one area. So being into production of any sector, you need to purchase assets. And when you purchase assets like machines and so on, you need to be thorough with the accounting treatment. So what are the costs you're going to capitalize? What are the costs you're going to expense? And how do you deal with the subsequent treatment? So you need to have a good knowledge about the different expenses that you can capitalize and what you need to expense to the SOPL. Right, so those are some of the areas that can be highly relevant to your pre-scene. Now, please do not do the mistake of simply limiting to the areas that I'm talking about. Let me repeat myself again. Do not limit your studies and your revising to only the areas that I am discussing in this video. Please remember that you can be tested from all the different areas across the three subjects. So please do not handpick any areas. Yes, I would accept the fact that some areas are more relevant than the others. But then again, that does not mean that you can skip any area. So please make sure that you are thorough with all the areas in your three subjects. Right. So many more points to discuss in that paragraph, but let me simply move on to the next paragraph. TFT was established just over 200 years ago. That's a really long time, and within this time it would have gone through so many phases, right? It would have gathered a lot of experience. There are chances where the company might, there are periods where the company might have done really well. There might have been periods where the company went down, but again may have recovered and so on. So it's a success story to see that this company is still existing, but we don't know how successful they are now or what's their current position. We are yet to find that out. But having been in the industry for 200 years, that's a major strength, or that's a major experience, because they would have gone through different phases, right? So this was started by Joseph Thomas. Joseph was originally involved in shipping, and due to his access to tea cargoes, developed a liking for tea and developed an ability to taste the difference between tea leaves from different regions. So we have a little bit of information about the origin of the company, the founder, and that's how it has got the name Thomas, of course. He became increasingly interested in the tea trade, and he saw the popularity of tea drinking grow and envisaged that this could be the basis for a profitable new business venture. He started to develop his own distinctive blend of tea and established Thomas Fine Teas in 1805. So 1805 to 2018, so that's well above 200 years, around something close to 214 years, which is a very long time. So the popularity of tea has increased over time. If you look at statistics, you see from the 19th century until, of course, the current time, there's a very high increase in the consumption for tea, right? Because mainly people see the health benefits of tea, and of course tea has 0 calories, as you know, okay, and it's considered to be a drink that will, you know, energize you, that will really get you into the, you know, mood of working and so on, sometimes when you are feeling lethargic and so on, right? So I'm sure all of you have at least tasted 1 cup of tea in your life, so you all know what I'm talking about. So let's move on to the next para. TFT has evolved to be one of Dealen's largest tea blenders, known for the premium quality of the tea leaves it uses and the distinctive tastes of its blends. Right, so this one particular word in this sentence, which is of course premium, this gives you some indication about the generic strategy it uses. So as you know, in your syllabus we look at Porter's generic strategies, cost leadership and differentiation. So having premium quality would definitely be in line with differentiation, and this would help the company to command a premium price as well, because with high quality you will have to charge a high price generally from the customer, because high quality comes at a higher cost, because you need to source the best quality tea leaves, you need to ensure that your, you know, packaging is very attractive to the customer, right? And the tea bags are properly packed, okay, they are not loose and they just don't break off and, you know, sink inside the tea, right? So these are little things that they need to ensure when it comes to high quality, but mainly of course the taste, right? The distinctive taste of its blends. So that is something that goes along with the premium quality. Now in terms of their marketing strategy also, they need to reflect about the fact that they are you know, selling a premium brand, and of course with the long history, it would have a very popular name across Dealand, okay, and probably one of the well-respected brands. Over the years, product developments have included the introduction of the tea bag and the development of new black tea blends. Right, so product development is important for the sustainability of the company, because there are times where certain products, their life cycle would end, but then when it comes to a product like tea, well, there's a good chance that it has a very long life cycle, and it may not get outdated due to, of course, technological reasons and so on, but maybe due to the newer blends being more popular, that can, you know, that can make the older blends a little outdated. But by its nature, it's difficult to think that, you know, a particular blend would get outdated due to any other reason. Now nevertheless, it's important for TFT to keep introducing new flavors and so on into the market. One thing is, it would of course satisfy the customer, and you may be able to tap into new groups of customers, right? So for example, there might be a particular customer that does not consume tea, but let's say there's a there's a new blend that this customer may try out just randomly, and let's say the customer starts to like it. So there you go, you have one additional new customer. So it's just one customer, but imagine there might be so many different people like that. So that way you can attract more people into your customer base, and of course increase your top line. That's the sales figure. And talking about development, we can it also reminds us of the intangible assets part of F1. Now here you have to be careful when treating the development cost, because if you look at internally generated assets, probably the only asset that can be capitalized is the development cost according to the F1 syllabus. And before capitalizing development cost, it has to meet certain conditions which are clearly stated in your F1 textbook. So you need to have a good idea about what these conditions are, and more importantly, you should have the ability to apply this into a given scenario. Now, one of our mock exams include a very good question on IAS 38, right, regarding the capitalization or regarding the accounting treatment of a new packaging process. So that particular answer and that particular task and the model answer that we suggest would give you a very good knowledge about the application and how exactly you need to tackle such a question. And IAS 38 is of course an area that I have seen in almost every session in the past. So it's one of the key areas. And as I was talking about earlier, the product life cycle. Now we need to also keep an eye about the competitors that we are dealing with. There might be some competitors that are constantly introducing new blends, but just because our competitor is doing that, it doesn't mean we need to necessarily follow the trend, especially if most of the new blends that are being introduced by the competitor is failing, right, or customers are not accepting, then it's not something we need to worry about. But then again, we shouldn't be too complacent as well. So we need to strike a balance. So we need to be very sensible here. So not try to conceptualize or not try to follow anyone else, but have a constant eye on the market and see what's going on. So it's important for us to conduct market research time to time, get expert opinions, right? Get opinions from customers, of course, through research. And we need to tackle the situation accordingly. Sometimes we may not have the first move advantage in case the overall market trend changes. Let's say they move drastically from black tea to green tea, and maybe we are currently more into black tea, but we can change into green tea in the near future. So we need to plan our moves accordingly so that we are always ahead of competition, right? So being proactive is the key here. Right, moving on, the company has also been at the forefront in market development, encouraging the popularity of green teas and several flavored infusions which are becoming increasingly popular. Right, so the company has been at the forefront in market development. So that is a good sign, because it's always good to be a pioneer of change or be one of the early adapters to changes in the market trends, because that way you can have an edge over your competitors. And as I was explaining earlier to you, green tea is becoming increasingly popular all over the world, right? To be honest, in fact, while discussing this pre-scene, I'm having a cup of green tea right next to me, because as I mentioned to you, it's good for your health, right? And it's good to reduce your, say, cholesterol levels and so on. And several flavored infusions. Now these flavored infusions may be based on fruits, may be based on certain herbs, and that also would have tremendous health benefits. Now the cost of packing these might be slightly higher than green tea. Beg your pardon, it's black tea, right? So green tea and flavored infusions, the cost is slightly higher than black tea, and even the price is the same. So that is generally a global trend. So they need to make sure that the pricing strategy is right, and that will of course reflect the premium quality that we give out. So this developing trends can also impact our sales forecasting. Now we use two types of forecasting techniques: quantitative, which is of course covered in P1 through time series analysis, including moving averages, regression analysis, and so on. Then the second broad method would be of course qualitative techniques, including market research, expert opinions, Delphi technique, and so on. So it's important for you to go through these areas. Now the qualitative techniques, it's of course theoretical, so you need to know, some details about it. But looking at the quantitative aspect, now if you look at time series analysis, coming up with a trend, seasonal factors, and so on, that is something that you need to properly study, right? So when markets change, when the trends keep on changing continuously, it would be a little difficult to rely on quantitative analysis, because quantitative analysis is based on the assumption that what has already happened in the past is a reliable, it's reliable to extrapolate it into the future and of course predict or forecast future sales. But overall, when you look at the tea market, it's fairly stable right now. Although you see people getting more into the green tea and of course flavored infusions, that doesn't mean that they are completely quitting black tea. Maybe the demand for black tea has slightly come down, or maybe it's constant, right? But there aren't major changes like what you see in the technology market. So this would make technique like time series analysis highly applicable for us. So you need to do some practice, right? You need to look at a certain scenario and think of a question yourself, and then answer that on how time series analysis can be applicable to TFT. And we would also be introducing a question in one of our mock exams connected to forecasting. So you can always contact us and get information on which mock this is. So if you're planning to, let's say, purchase or invest in mock exams individually rather than go for a package based on the areas that you prefer, we can always support you with that. Right, next paragraph, looking at the location of the business. So the business is based on a single site in Hightown, a large industrial town in the north of Deland. It uses a mixture of old established tasting and blending techniques and modern processing and packing equipment to enable high volume production. Now, several pros and cons that you can think of simply having a single site. So in the single site, you can have all the functions together, the production and maybe the support functions like finance, marketing, and so on. So that would actually be a benefit, because everything is just close to each other and the coordination becomes stronger. But the downside of it would be it's overly reliant in case something goes wrong in, say, the production, say some sort of a natural disaster occurs, then you'll have to completely halt your production until the problem is resolved. So that would mean you have to temporarily stop supplying your products into the market, and stock out can be an issue. But that's assuming a worst case scenario. So several pros and cons would exist. And this is of course a large industrial town. So that would mean that possibly we have more access to labor, and infrastructure is better. You have access to producers of machines possibly, right? So we know that in an industrial town, the access to labor and of course the labor rates might be bearable, right? And the recruitment process can be easy. But I'm not 100% going by that assumption, because although it's industrial, they may be focused on a few industries, and maybe tea packing may not be within that scope, so we wouldn't exactly know. but generally industrial town would mean you have good access to labor. So infrastructure would also be important, because you need the transportation of the tea leaves coming in, right? So being a large producer, you can generally expect frequent deliveries into the factory or into the site from the ports, right? So all of that is very important for the logistics aspect of it. Now it's located in the north of Dealand, but we are not very sure whether this is close by to a port. It would be very helpful if it is close by to a port, because that can reduce the transport charges. Now in terms of the production, we see that they are using a hybrid strategy, because they have traditional production techniques or tasting and blending techniques, and also modern. Now this is a feature that is seen in most tea factories. Now if you look at a country like Sri Lanka, where tea grows and the blending happens here itself, the packing included. So here you see a lot of traditional techniques being used. Now if you look at a small process like picking tea leaves, it's still done mainly manually, so that the quality of the tea leaf is preserved. So due to similar reasons, you have to still use traditional techniques, right? Because tea is generally considered as a vintage or classical product with the taste being special and so on. So you need to make sure that the production and the packing, blending, everything happens in such a way that the taste is preserved, right? And of course it says that it enables high volume production. Now high volume production is definitely important, because yes, tea might be a premium product in this case, but margins may not be extremely high, right? Because it's a food beverage item. So volume based production is important to maximize your profits in an absolute sense. So being a large producer, this is very important. Now we know that E1 looks into different production techniques, or how IT can be included in the production process, right? So we need to consider the applicability of things like manufacturing resource planning, possible use of robots, automated techniques in the process. So those would be applicable in terms of the streamlining strategy that they have used. And also now when it comes to production, they need to decide on their capacity plan. So according to E1, we are looking at 3 types of plans. Level capacity, that's where you produce constant amount, say every month. Then you have the chase demand strategy, where you produce in line with the demand that you are going to face. And of course the demand management, where you use certain tactics to make sure that your production stays constant, or your demand and production both stays constant right throughout the year. So maybe we'll have more information regarding this in the later pages, but just something for you to think about. Thomas Fine Tea's, TFT is still a privately owned company under the control of Joseph Thomas's descendants. The current managing director, Fred Thomas, is assisted by his wife Nina, who is the product director, and their daughter Christy Smith, who is the finance director. So it's still a family-based company, private ownership. Now, when it comes to the ownership, there are certain areas that would be applicable, especially for a listed company. For example, if you are looking at corporate governance is applicable to a limited company, where you have to, it's advisable to split the role of chairman and CEO, where it's advisable to have more non-executive directors in the board, and so on. And of course, if you look at certain F1 standards like IFRS 8 operating segments, consolidation, right? So those are applicable mainly to public limited companies. But let me give you a warning here. Just because they are a privately owned company, it does not mean that you can skip certain areas that only apply to public limited companies. Let me repeat myself. Just because they are a private limited company, it does not mean that you can ignore areas relevant for public limited companies. The reason is this. Let's just say at your exam, the first task tells you TFT has decided to list itself as a public limited company. See, now you're in trouble. If you ignore the areas relevant to a public limited company, you're in deep trouble. So please do not go by assumptions and skip any area. Right? So the bottom line here is do not skip any subject area. Right? So being a family-based business, well, it's a good thing because still the traditions may continue, but then again the culture and the attitude might still be a little risk averse, or they might be resistant to change the cultures and the traditions that have been followed since inception. Okay, so there are many sides to look at, and we don't have sufficient information to discuss about this in detail for now, but maybe as we proceed along the pre-scene we can find out more information. Now looking at the next page, it talks about your role. So you are the finance officer. You are the finance officer working in the finance department of TFT. Now finance officer is generally the title that is allocated to you in almost every pre-scene, OCS pre-scene. So finance officer is also equivalent to junior accountant as well as assistant management accountant. So you will generally be reporting directly to the finance manager. So as it says, you are primarily or you're principally responsible for preparing management and financial accounting information, although you're often asked to perform tasks that affect other areas of the business. So as your case study examiner states, your main trigger is of course P1, right? Because if you look at the subjects P1 and F1, they are mainly finance based. So P1 is into the internal aspects, which is management accounting. F1 is more into the reporting aspects, and of course the working capital management, which is an internal aspect. But remember that you also have a subject named E1, which covers the other functions of the business: marketing, HR, IT, then operations management, right? So just because you're a finance officer, that does not mean you're only tested from E1 and P1. Sorry, beg your pardon, it's F1 and P1. You will also be tested from E1 related aspects, because for those of you that are working, for those of you that are currently employed, you would understand what I'm talking about. So it's not possible for you to simply survive in the company just by having technical or specialized knowledge in finance, but you need to have certain knowledge about the other aspects, and this is why CIMA is a good qualification, because it looks at a 360-degree approach, and especially this case study exam where you have to integrate the knowledge from all three subjects. So once again reminding you, make sure that you are thorough with all the subject areas, because you can be of course tested from any area, and your tasks in your case study exam are such that it may be a combination from two subjects. So you might be, let's say for example, you might have a task where you are required to comment about how ABC might be better than maybe the current system, which might be say absorption costing, and in the same question you might have a task where you have to explain how you can manage people related aspects when you switch from absorption to ABC, which is of course related to E1. So this integration is what adds value for you. So one of the keys to pass this exam is to think very practically. Yes, it's a technical exam where 64% marks comes from technical, but keep in mind that technical does not mean simply duplicating notes from your textbook, duplicating theories, right? It's all about the application into the scenario. Remember, companies hire you not for what you know, but how you are able to use it in the context of employment. So with that, the introductory video comes to an end. But if you're interested in following my analysis throughout the entire pre-scene, you can always invest in that package by clicking on the link below. So just to give you a brief explanation about what we offer to you, we have documents that analyze the strategic models. As I told you, the strategic analysis document. We have a full analysis on the tea industry, including a real world company that is close to the model of TFT, right? So that's the industry analysis. And apart from that, we also have our very own study notes for the 3 subjects, E1, P1 and F1. We have a workbook that includes tasks specially made for Thomas Fine teas, including the model answers. So we have around 7 short tasks for each of the subjects, and we also have a model task for each of the subject along with the answer, so that is close to an exam related question that you can get, right? And we also provide a free mini mock exam including a task from E1, P1 and F1, right, which is of course a 3-hour exam that you can access. Again, there's a link that is at the bottom of the video. And finally, we also offer 5 mock exams that are very close to the exam standard, and you also have the option of getting these marked from our professional team of markers, which comes with the investment named the Silver. And if you look at the gold package, investing in the gold package will give you access to one-on-one tutoring with one of our dedicated tutors from the LCI Academy team. So if you have any questions, please feel free to leave your comment here, and I will get back to you, or one of my team members will help you out with the query. We also have a WhatsApp group that we use to share our knowledge, where we discuss certain questions, where we clear our doubts. It includes 3 of the LCI Academy tutors and of course myself. I'm a part of the group, so I shall respond to your questions as well. So the WhatsApp group link will also be included at the bottom of the video, and you can of course join through clicking on that link. It's an open link. So with that said, I wish you all the very best with your exams, and we are definitely there to help you out. You can always join our big family, LCI Academy. We have students globally that are a part of this family, that have invested in our products, that use our study support, and we will give you all the study material that you need, and we will watch you conquer the exam. We will watch you conquer the OCS examining style. So if there is any help that you need from our end, please feel free to drop a comment, and I would invite you to join the WhatsApp group as well. So with that being said, I'm signing out for now. I wish you all the very best with your exams. Cheers.